Welcome to Leadership Unlocked, where we uncover the pivotal stories that shape extraordinary leaders. I'm Dusty Holcomb, and on this show, we don't just talk about leadership, we decode it. In every episode, we sit down with the change makers who've walked through fire, challenged the status quo, and emerged with wisdom worth sharing. These aren't just lessons, they're lived experiences, real moments that reveal the mindset, the resilience, and the clarity behind creating lasting impact. Today, you'll hear one of those stories. Mo Fathelbab has spent nearly 3 decades doing what most leaders talk about, but few master, building cultures where truth can be spoken, trust runs deep, and performance takes off. He's trained thousands of CEOs and facilitators around the world, helped launch the global forum movement for YPO and EO, and literally wrote the books on it, Forum and the Friendship Advantage. He's a yogi, a skier, a scuba diver, and the rare leader who can turn conflict into connection in any room that he walks into. If you've ever wondered how to create a team culture where people tell the truth and still want to show up tomorrow, this episode shows you how it's done. Let's get into it. This is Leadership Unlocked. Mo, I am so delighted to get to spend a little bit of time with you. I've had the opportunity to do so both on a professional basis and on your podcast. And man, every time I've spent any time with you, I've come away enriched and encouraged. So I'm delighted that you're going to get to spend a little bit of time with our audience today. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dusty. It's been a pleasure getting to know you, and I'm honored to be on your show and looking forward to dive in.
Well, I'm going to start with, and we're going to have a wide-ranging conversation, I am sure. But you have such a fascinating background, and you have helped so many leaders across the world. I want to start with this before we kind of unpack your story, but I want to start with, what is a leadership belief or principle that you have lived and learned and now live by on a daily basis?
Listen deeply. Seek to understand. I think too often our differences are because we don't listen.
Now, is that something that you knew and have always practiced, or did you have to learn that the hard way along the way?
You know, I remember this story with my grandfather when I was a kid. He does this meditation before we drive off. The stick shift was shaking. It was vibrating a little bit. And I asked him, why is this vibrating? And because he was in his middle of his thing, and he didn't want to talk, he just kind of like looked at me. And the look said, we had this conversation before. And he just motioned like this to say, the engine's moving, things are... But it was one look that said, hey, Mo, you didn't listen the first time. You ask somebody a question, pay attention. Don't ask it again.
When you said this, listen, I'm like, oh yeah, of course, we all know we should be better listeners. But then you're listening, when the way you just described it with the story from your grandfather, not just listening to respond, but really listening to learn and not making people repeat it. Like that's so rich because there's so many nuances to listening. There's so many ways that, like, I know I could be better. Just ask my wife. I've got to get better at it every day. Tell our audience a little bit about yourself and your background so that we can start unpacking some of your great stories.
I took a class in entrepreneurship at University of Maryland, and it changed my life in ways I never imagined. So my teacher was Vern Harnish, who is the founder of what was called Young Entrepreneurs Organization. At the time, you had to have $1 million business. You have to have started $1 million business and joined by the age of 35. So here I am, this student. It was my last semester in college, and I'm just blown away by this incredible teacher, best teacher I ever had. Great story with this Young Entrepreneurs Organization. And he would bring in different members to speak to us every week. And it was just incredibly inspiring. But it ended up changing my life because Vern offered me a job to be his associate director. Within a year, he quit. I became executive director, which, was very hard to believe at that time. I was 23. And I had imposter syndrome for sure. While I was there, we learned about something magical from the Young Presidents Organization, YPO. And what we learned is this concept called forum, which is a group of CEOs who meet every week, every month rather, in a confidential, structured environment to help each other be the best they could be, personally, professionally, any way you could imagine. So I went to this training in 1991 that was put on by two of YPO's best facilitators. We had 20 members from North America, from all over, from YEO. And we expected that each of them was going to go back and start forums in their chapters. And as you could imagine, that's a tall order. And I really thought, well, if we're gonna get this on the map, I gotta start doing this. So there was a group in Vancouver, British Columbia, of all places, where their facilitator backed out with 24 hours notice, and they're like, "Mo, you gotta do this." And I went up there and I ran this one day training to launch this group, and it was magical. It was rewarding. It was fulfilling. From there, I went around and did this in 30 countries. And then, of course, trained a bunch of facilitators to expand because I couldn't keep up with the growing membership and be the one sole facilitator any longer. So in 1997, I decided it was my favorite part of my job. I quit as executive director of YEO and started Forum Resources Network. After that, started Alumni Forum Services, where we provided peer groups for Harvard Business School alumni. Along the way, we've done this with underrepresented minorities at Google and a slew of other organizations. And it's been one of the most rewarding careers I could ever imagine, honestly. And then just a couple of years ago, we started IFO, International Facilitators Organization, again, to help multiply this effort and help more folks.
I have a million questions. I've already written down 5, but I want to start with this one. When you first were exposed to Forum, what was it that resonated? Why is this format so powerful? What captured or captivated you? Because I don't think, if you haven't been exposed to this, and obviously I have been, so I have a little bit of inside baseball here, but I would love to hear from you. What was it about that experience that captivated you? And why have you really, it sounds like, made this your life mission to bring this to others? And we'll talk about your big, hairy, audacious goal later on. But what captivated you? Why is this so powerful? Why does it matter?
Well, it was the first time that I witnessed a group of people being vulnerable, being honest, being open, some in tears, and feeling good about it, feeling growth, feeling connection. And I found myself sharing things I'd never shared before. And I thought, this is incredibly powerful. I fell in love with it from the start. This is connecting. And maybe a little backstory, prior to that moment, I certainly didn't feel that I had these opportunities to be so open and vulnerable. I probably felt judged by people that were well-meaning, but you know how it goes. The adults want you to be the best version of yourself, and they keep telling you what to do. And it's part of the magic of this process is we don't give advice because it doesn't go so well.
There's this old saying, and I think it's true. I'd love to get your thoughts on it, but that leadership is lonely. And, there's a lot of good reasons for that. And, like I said, I want to hear your thoughts on it, but I think of it, through this lens of it doesn't have to be. Like, you don't have to buy into that as a limiting belief or a prescription. And Forum can be not an antidote, but it can be a cure for that thought. So maybe a 2-part question. What are your thoughts on, is leadership lonely, and maybe why you think that or why not? And then, is Forum or a Forum type of environment an antidote to that thesis of leadership as loneliness?
We've heard this for decades. It's lonely at the top. I think it goes back to Ray Hickok, the founder of YPO, and why he started YPO in the first place, by saying it's lonely at the top. With, the idea here is, who do I talk to? My friends don't get it because they didn't end up in a $15 million business after we went to, our formative schooling together. Some of us went this way, some of us went that way, but my friends don't get it. my family's sick of hearing about it, or they don't get it, and can I really talk to my employees? So those things have been said. I've heard those many a time as to why it might be lonely at the top. So to your second point, there's two things. It's not just forum that creates or is an antidote for this loneliness, but I also think a modern organization is very different than what I saw when I started working, in fact, at GM in 1988. So now we have transparency. We have valuing, relationships more than being transactional. We have companies that actually value relationships and understand the value of vulnerability in building those relationships. And we have tools for having difficult conversations in healthy ways, so we're not just attacking one another. And with all of that, I don't think it has to be lonely at the top anymore. But certainly for many it is, and that's unfortunate.
It is unfortunate. And again, you just don't have to buy into that limiting belief that it must be that way. And I was talking to someone a few weeks ago and she was asking me a question and she says, am I crazy? Am I the only person that feels that, that it's isolated and lonely? I'm like, oh gosh, you're not crazy. Like we've all had moments that we feel that way. And it's quite normal. Well, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your story, and I'd love to know, what was a defining moment? Maybe a challenge that has shaped or framed how you lead and how you show up. I think all leaders have dozens of these throughout their life or throughout their careers. But what was one that you can look back at now and go, that was one of my keystone moments. That was an inflection point. Maybe you didn't recognize it at the time, right? Maybe we don't see these things in the moment. But what was one of your keystone moments that has shaped and forever changed you because you had the opportunity to have experienced this and it happened for you?
I mean, look, I could think of many, as you suggested. One of them was when I was towards the end of my career at the Young Entrepreneurs Organization. I was in this, I don't want to call it a conflict, we'll call it a negotiation with the board because I felt I was underpaid. And based on data and science and people that I knew that were also executive directors of nonprofits, I was underpaid. And what happened is they hired a consultant to do an evaluation, and that guy said exactly verbatim the same words as his friend board member who hired him. So in that moment, I just said to the guy, listen, I got to go. I'm done with this conversation because I just saw that it wasn't going anyway. I was in our conference room by myself, and that job was not just a job. It was my identity. It was my life. It was my baby. I started working there when we had 200 members, and I quit when we had 2,000 members. So it was an emotional moment for me, and I was perhaps devastated in the moment, but I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world because what it led to is I work for myself. I have my own business. I do what I love, and I don't do the other pieces of the job that I don't love.
Maybe it was like predestined that you were going to be an entrepreneur, especially working for an organization like that, where that's what you're surrounded with.
Well, it goes deeper than that. I mean, look, I grew up and many entrepreneurs in my family, and I did take that entrepreneurship class because I had an interest in entrepreneurship. And for as long as I worked at YEO, people would ask, so when are you going to start your own business? So when are you going to start your own business? And my answer was, you know what? I'm looking for an intersection of two things. I really feel good about what business I want to start, and I'm really not happy here anymore. That's exactly when I left.
You're reminding me of something that somebody once told me, and something that I have shared with others, which is, you never want to run from something. You want to run to something. And that's how you can really feel like this is the right place, that intersection of passion and opportunity. And I'm deeply indebted to you for having taken that step for yourself. You mentioned that you came from a family of entrepreneurs. Like, what was your very first entrepreneurial venture? Was it earlier than when you started your own business?
Yeah. Of course. I mean, I was probably 14, 13, and I was painting house numbers on curbs. I mean, I didn't have a boss. I mean, me and a friend would go out and one of us would do the sales pitch, one of us would do the painting, and I'd come home after school with $150 in my pocket.
That's pretty rich.
That is
You were
pretty rich.
doing well. So I have to ask, were you the salesperson or were you the painter?
I did both.
So
All right.
you were able to flex and go to both paths.
Yeah, I did both. Yeah.
That's awesome. What when you decided to make this leap and you'd had this inflection point, you'd had this opportunity to make a different decision, was it crystal clear to you how you were going to go create value for others, exactly what you were going to do? And or did you have to experiment? Did you have to fall into it? Did you have to find different ways until you figured out what really resonated?
Well, first of all, it took me a year and a half to make any money, and I had to live in my mom's basement on $30,000 of credit card debt before things got going. So let's start there.
That's a great place to start. So you weren't one of those instant Instagram millionaire success entrepreneurs that we love to make successful. It's like you have the true entrepreneur's journey story, which is it's not easy, and you got to struggle your way through it. So
You got to struggle your way through it. And so, yeah, it took a while. Absolutely, it took a while. But no, I started with a clear vision, but we had to zig, we had to zag. I mean, good vision is wonderful, but then reality hits.
when did you know you were on the right path?
I got to tell you something. I knew I was on the right path even when I was making no money. I had all the conviction that this is the best thing since sliced bread, and I have not changed my mind. I just knew the power of this. I've seen it with so many entrepreneurs and CEOs that it was just a matter of why does this process only exist in 3 organizations at the time that I knew of: YPO, YEO, and Vistage. What about the rest of the world? What about the rest of the associations? What about? And so, no, I never lost conviction. That's one thing I could say is true.
I was in Vistage for about 15 years before I joined YPO. And so for 20 plus years, I've had a forum type of environment. It is so incredibly powerful. One of the things that is so neat about it is because it is confidential, right? So I'm not going to ask you to share any stories, but I would love to hear, what are the types of transformation that you have seen others experience without telling their story? But what is the type of transformation that can come from the ability to be vulnerable, the ability to be cared for and loved on, the ability to be heard? What types of transformation could people experience in this type of environment?
Well, I'll be very specific and speak about myself, and that violates no one else's confidentiality. I hadn't talked to my father for 10 years at one point, and it's 1,000% because of my group that I broke the ice and started talking to him again. So that's one. Getting the courage to quit a job and start a business? Absolutely. Often and early on in my forum, I thought, I was the peon in the group, but it inspires you, right? If you want to get better at something, you play with somebody better than you. Just every day you hear what these people are doing, and it's how could it not inspire you?
That's so cool. What kind of things have you learned from those that you have mentored and advised? I mean, you've been around some of the best leaders, the most successful leaders in the world. What types of nuggets or pearls of wisdom that have you pulled from their toolboxes and added to your own?
Well, one of the things that you hear early on as an entrepreneur is, are you working in the business or on the business? And honestly, I've been in the business for most of my career. And when I started IFO, my goal in starting it was to work on the business and multiply Mo, because there's only me, and that doesn't work. So today we have 46 facilitators in 6 countries, and we have somebody who's running that business day to day. So I feel like I'm finally, stepping in that direction, and we're still in the beginning, but it's exciting. So that's one. Another one is when I witness these incredibly successful people, and you alluded to something, I think tongue in cheek earlier, overnight success. And you and I know there is no overnight success. And when you get to really hear those stories, most of these people are working on the same thing for a very long time, for very long hours, and often sacrificing other things, which leads to the next lesson. And that is, sometimes you meet somebody who's truly What I say is an Uber entrepreneur, and those people can have 10 businesses because they don't run any of them. That'd be my biggest wish for you and I.
Yes, it's well, you touched on something there that I really love is like identifying the one thing that you do. There's only one Mo. And so Mo is not scalable beyond some point, but there are things that you do better than anybody else in the world. And so how do you spend 80 or 90% of your time doing that and only that? And you're not running the business, to your point about that Uber entrepreneur who's got 10 businesses and they're not running any of them. They have the vision and the courage and the ability to start things and find product fit and all those things. How did you start to identify your gift and your place where you create the most value? And then how did you have the discipline to say no to good things that would allow you to do only those things you could do?
It's taken me a long time to figure out how to say no. And, I worked with an executive coach for years and years and years. And one of the things she would always say to me is, no to others is yes to yourself. I'm just getting better and better at that because I'm a yes man at heart. She said, saying no to others is saying yes to yourself.
We so often forget that, right? And I talk to leaders all the time and I'll say, hey, look, self leadership isn't selfish. Like we have to take care of ourselves so that we can be our best selves in service to others. And it's so easy to say yes to everyone else and put ourselves last. So I'm glad that you got that lesson. My question originally, but man, that's a question I would love to dig deeper into in a minute with you. But my question originally was, how did you discover your unique ability and where you got to create the most value? And then how have you been able to really live into that and say no to the things that are good things, but would pull you away from that?
I'll go back to, probably 1993. I would do a forum training to launch a new group, and there would be a call with the executive committee. They'd say, "How was the training?" And my answer would be, "It was a 9.9 out of 10. It was a 10 out of 10. It was a 9.75." That would be my answer. And Keith Alper, who is a YPO member who started the St. Louis chapter for EO back in '93, would always make fun of me. He's like, "Mo, I just want to know how it was, not how you scored." But what I realized in those evaluations is that people really appreciate the work that I'm doing. And I got very specific feedback and evaluations about what I'm bringing to the table. That's when I realized, hey, I go to the board meeting and we talk through financials, and I'm a finance major, and that drains my energy. But then I go do these groups and start these incredible connections and relationships, and that fills my cup. So it became pretty easy to follow that route. In fact, as I might have said earlier, this business was my favorite part of my job. And so I constantly ask myself, what is my favorite part of my job now?
I love that. And so you use that lens to help say no to the things that might pull you away from it?
Exactly.
Is that easy to do?
I'll give you another example. I stopped doing strategic planning because I realized that's not the part where I am most magical. That's not the part where I bring my unique value. So I don't know that I've been good at saying no all the time, but there are a couple of examples. I think I've done all right.
Well, it's great that you say that. And it's okay to say no.
Yeah.
But when you say no to strategic planning, you're getting to do that thing that only you can do. And, I've personally been able to experience what you do in that launch environment. And it's so powerful to create a place of safety. There's a recipe in here, Mo. But what is, and I'm asking this for our audience, because I don't think many of us spend enough time really being thoughtful about what it is that we do that creates the most value for others, and then doing that. I understand what fills your cup, but what is it that others pull from you and say, wow, you need to do more of that? What is it that you actually do that creates so much value for others?
I'm going to do something rare because I just got this email yesterday and I want to read it because you know what? Or at least a part of it. And I'm not going to say from who it is, but it's a big multi-billion-dollar company. I worked with their executive team because they needed help with their offsite. So here we go. It says, "Thank you for being authentic once again. and helping the team unlock some long-standing issues. Many things that were raised yesterday have been simmering for months, in some cases for years. It was the first time the group had a forum to address them safely and constructively. After you left, those of us who remained spoke openly about other issues, all done the same way you modeled. That's a big breakthrough. I think the word of the day here is being authentic.
Thank you for sharing that. And that's such a powerful testament because these problems exist, these challenges exist in organizations of every size. That happens to be a multi-billion-dollar company, but it can be a company of two, a company of
Oh,
three.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And having a facilitator, having someone who can come in and authentically broker conversations that are real and surface issues that need to just be talked about, but not in a conflict forward manner. Maybe it is in a conflict forward manner sometimes, but not in an accusatory manner, but just surfacing what needs to be said is so incredibly powerful.
Yeah. But you asked the formula, so I'm going to give you the formula.
Please do.
First, people have to actually opt in. You know, when I got a call from the CEO and she said, I want to do this, I said, great. Have you guys discussed it? What are the outcomes? She goes, man, we haven't discussed it. I go, well, we need to make sure these people want to do this because we can't force them to do it. The second thing is once people have opted in is they have to have a voice in co-creating the agenda. And so we always start with a survey and we ask some key questions. And then at the meeting, you know, the first thing we do is establish the safety. So what are the ground rules for safety? Everything's confidential. No interrupting. No judgment. Don't roll your eyes. Because it's body language too. It's not just words. And then I model whatever it is that I ask them to do. If we're going to do an exercise to deepen the connections, I'm the first to go. I'm the first to be real. I make it natural. I make it normal. I make it okay. And we've all got our stuff. Nobody goes through this world unscathed. And it's just a question of where do we find connection through those difficulties.
Where do we find connection through those difficulties? We've all been through them. And we're way more alike than we are different if we allow ourselves to recognize that first and foremost, we're humans.
Well, that's the thing, Dusty, more so than whether we've elected one politician or another or one party or another. We all, and I don't want to generalize because that's one of our rules here in our process, but I think you'll agree we care more about our families than we do what politicians are doing what. And if we really dig in and talk about the relationships that we have invested so much in, we have very common threads and deep connections between people because we've all had struggles with those things.
Most leaders don't need more advice. They simply need clarity. That's what the Vision to Victory scorecard is all about. It's free, it's fast, and it gives you a clear picture of where you are and what's next. Start now at clarityalignmentexecution.com. Let's make sure that your next step forward is the right one. We get so polarized. There's so much polarization now. And frankly, some of it's just algorithmically driven, right? Tools are used to amplify emotions in a way that aren't healthy and are pervasive, and because they're driving another goal. If you're not paying for the product, you are the product kind of mindset. And as you think about this, because of that, we can show up into meetings and we can show up into sessions with beliefs that maybe even aren't our own. What is it? What's your secret judo move to help distill that and drive through that surface layer of potential disagreement and really drive to that shared humanity of caring about our families, et cetera? Is there a secret question or a secret silver bullet judo move that you use to help people connect?
Many. But look, I think it starts with the why. And so in the context of working with an executive team, pretty much always present Patrick Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team. And I'm sure many of your audience are familiar with this model, but it starts with trust. And when you have trust, you can have healthy conflict. And then accountability, and then attention to results, and all that stuff. But more importantly, without the trust, you can't have healthy conflict. And then the conflict might actually be ugly conflict. So we don't want ugly conflict, and we don't want avoidance of conflict. In my book, The Friendship Advantage, we call it kind truth. So how do I communicate the difficult stuff kindly? And so the judo move is convincing the group that the value of vulnerability is essential for building relationships. I have a conversation with every group. What does vulnerability mean? Why be vulnerable? And people will say, well, that's how you build connection. It's a relief. It gets things off your chest. That's how you grow. And so when they've bought it, when it's their own, now they're more willing. And then the second piece of the judo is it's contagious, right? So emotional intelligence tells us that the first person who shares impacts what happens next. And so if you start with the joker in the group, less likely it's going to go to a meaningful place. So when I said lead by example, I either lead by example personally every time, or unless I know somebody has it, because I'm reading the room constantly. That's part of being a facilitator. Reading body language, looking for cues.
Simple, but not easy, right? It's easy to say. And I think most of the great things are simple. Like when we have demonstrated our ability to take very complex things and just distill them to the simple parameters, that's often the hardest things to do. It's like to be vulnerable, but then to really understand what that means and show up. And, I know that I've gone through phases where I thought I was being vulnerable, but I wasn't. There was still a layer. There was still a truth that I was holding on to, which was I'm afraid of being judged. I'm afraid of being seen as weak. I'm afraid of others thinking less of me. And the key there is the word that I used at the beginning, I. I was so richly worried about what others would think, as opposed to thinking, and I still, I'll be honest, I still worry about this and think about this. It's like, am I showing up in a vulnerable manner, not for me, but for others, so that I can just release this tension I'm holding on to? And it's hard. And yet you've got to have a safe place to do it. You've got to have a safe place. Mo, if you look back on your career and you look, obviously, Vern Harnish is a pretty good mentor to have. What was another great mentor? Sounds like your grandfather could have been one as well. But what's a great mentor and the number one lesson you learned from them?
My good friend Neil Balter, one of the founders of the Young Entrepreneurs Organization, founding board member. He started California Closet Company. Did quite well, but the thing about Neil that has always impressed me is I don't care whether he is trying to make his next multi-million-dollar deal or whether he is talking to the waiter or waitress at the restaurant. He treats them the same. He treats everybody with just incredible love and friendliness. And he always says, Mo, you get more with sugar than you do with vinegar.
It reminds me of a conversation I was having with someone last week and talking through, they were getting ready for some town hall meetings and they asked me if I'd ever done it. I said, yeah, one of the principal things I would always want to do when I was having a town hall meeting is I am here in the role of CEO, but I am a person first, and we don't have any value of human beings in this organization based on a role. We're just people. And my job here today is to communicate with you about some things that are important in our organization through the lens of my role. But I want to understand what's important to you through the lens of your role. And it's so powerful, like when we just treat people the same, and we treat people first and foremost. At the end of the day, we're all humans. We all put our britches on the same way in the morning, and we just have different roles to play. And there's no value differentiation there.
Another lesson I learned from him is, in my younger career days, sometimes if I wanted the board's approval for something, even after they said yes, I'd keep selling it. He'd be like, oh, you got the deal. Stop talking.
Yeah, I've been guilty of that a few times myself. And it's amazing how we just want to keep we want to keep selling. We want to keep telling people how much we know and how good of a decision this is. Like, they said yes, shut up. I've had to learn that one myself the hard way a few times. Mo, the work you're talking about, the things you're doing, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I would say that has to be emotionally or physically draining, like to show up with a degree of authenticity and then invest in others emotionally. So maybe it's the first question is that draining on you from an energy perspective, and how do you recharge to make sure that you're always showing up with 100% Mo-ness?
So first of all, I'm my toughest critic. Just so we're clear on what I'm about to say here. So to that end, when I work with a group and it goes to my standards, I'm always energized and on cloud nine on the way out the door. And thankfully, I think that happens 95% of the time. But when it doesn't is when I feel depleted. But when people are actually in and it's meaningful and it's juicy, it's like, you know what? That's just food for the soul.
How do you recharge? So even when it's great, even when you're coming out on cloud nine, how do you invest in yourself to ensure that you show up for the next one at 100% battery full? What are your secret tips for recharging for yourself?
Well, first of all, taking care of myself is an ongoing and daily process. So whether it's yoga, whether it's whatever exercise I do, because I've always done something, that is a non-negotiable for me. I used to train for triathlons, and I would spend 6 months working out, and then the weather would change and my schedule would get busy and I wouldn't work out for 6 months. And I realized that wasn't good for me. It wasn't good for my health. It wasn't good for my mental health. I did a lot of studying of positive psychology. I took a course through Wharton. And when you learn the importance of exercise for your mental well-being from positive psychology, you're like, well, there's not a chance I'm going to skip a workout anymore. And, so I'm no less than 6 days a week. It's just, unless there's some extenuating circumstances. And in those cases, usually I'm at least walking 3 miles at the airport.
It's interesting to hear you say that. And it's something that cognitively I know. Like I've done some of the similar things to you. And, like I know the power of that physical reset or foundation building. I would argue that I did some of my best professional work when I was also doing some triathlon stuff because I know that I was recharging my body, which was recharging my mind. What would you say to folks who get into a doom loop? Because I know I've done it as well, where you're like, I'm too busy to go work out. I need to go, I've got this 3 more hours of work to do. I'm not going to go do the run. I'm not going to go to yoga. I just need to get this thing done. How do you help others see that it's a counterintuitive approach here? You have to paradigm shift to understand that when you do this thing where you take care of yourself, you do better work. How do you help understand what is the psychology that people need to understand there?
A few things come to mind. One is if I'm not in my best mental shape, I'm more likely to see things as below the line versus above the line.
Ooh, that's rich. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm groggy, I'm irritable, I'm tired, I'm just not. The second thing is, even on my busiest days, what I found, if I look at my to-do list in the morning and it's overwhelming, 5 minutes of meditation, and I'm like, okay, I got this. Click, check, check, check. And it happens. The other thing that I learned from Peter Thomas, founder of Century 21 Canada, chairman of the advisory board of YEO, is, just put one foot in front of the other. He's like, I don't want to run. I go put on my running shoes. I go to bed in my running gear so that in the morning, all I have to do is put on my running shoes. And then it's like, okay, I'm halfway there. And so, yeah, I think even Dr. Seuss said it, just put one foot in front of the other.
Put one foot in front of the other. It's interesting we're talking about this. I had an experience earlier this week. I was speaking at an event and get back to the hotel and, early afternoon, 1 o'clock or so. And I've got the rest of the day. Now I've got, like you, I just said, I have this to-do list that's 1.5 miles long and I have all these things I need to do. And I walk past the hotel gym and I went, I know that I should just go right now and do a workout for an hour. I'll do better later. And I didn't do it. I went back to the room and opened up the laptop, and, the proverbial inbox was full. And I went, son of a gun. The next thing I know, I look up and it's 6 o'clock and I'm looking around and I felt like I had run in concrete all day. I couldn't look back and see where I'd accomplished anything that really mattered. Instead, I'd done a bunch of stuff. And I was, doing my end of day journal and reflection and what do I want to remember from today and what did I learn? And I said, I shouldn't have skipped the workout. I know that if I had done that, I would have been sharper. I'd have attacked the things that mattered. And so I think for me, you're probably a Jedi master at this. For me, I have to sometimes relearn these lessons I've already learned just to make sure they stick, because I can get sold into or buy into the tyranny of the urgent without really understanding what's most important.
So, the other thing is I've become addicted to exercise. And I don't know if that's good or bad, but here's the thing. I this morning lifted weights for just 15 minutes. It doesn't have to be an hour. When I started running, I would run for just 20 minutes. It ended up being an Ironman, but, I just started with 20-minute runs. Establishing the habit, I think, is about making it more attainable for me. When I do my yoga, it's 90 minutes, but, I don't have to lift weights for an hour. It's just how I've rationalized my way to make sure I get it done.
I like the way you just framed that, though, because so often people say this is the standard. Like, my level of success is I have to have a 90-minute workout, or I have to have an hour and, a hard workout, or I'm not going to do it at all. And instead saying I will do something. And if today only gives me 15 minutes to do weights, well, then I'm going to take those 15 minutes and I'm going to make those 15 minutes count. And I think it's just reframing what definition of success is. Like, I know I used to get into this paradigm of, if I can't go for a 10-mile run, I don't even want to go. And then I'm like, well, this is dumb. Some days I just need to go for a 3-mile shake it out jog and just let the body breathe. But resetting the definition of success to sometimes just take what you have, that 15 minutes.
And during the pandemic, I can't tell you how many calls I took while walking. Anytime I didn't have to sit in front of the screen, I'm like, let's go for a walk, Dusty.
Yep.
Headphones are in, I'm going for a walk.
That's my favorite. Personally, I love to go for a walk, and, everybody says, don't take your phone. But I have found, for me, if I take my phone and don't listen, but I have it there to record my thinking. So I'll just turn on a recorder and riff, because I process information out loud. It's how I do my best thinking. And so I've taken this practice of going for a long walk and my phone and headphones on, and I'll just record. Hey, here's some idea I'm thinking about. Now with all the great tools, I can take that transcript and I can turn it into something, or it just helps me process it. So, but being outside, the fresh air, our good common friend, Chuck Hall, the first thing he does when he gets up in the morning is his feet hit the floor and he's headed outside. He says, I just have to breathe the air. I just have to get out and feel it. And I think it's such a simple, but such a beautiful way to really ground yourself before the day. All right, Mo, I could talk with you. I could extract wisdom for you for hours, but I'm not going to do that out of preservation of your time. So I'm going to switch us to some rapid fire questions, and then we'll wrap this up. But I could hear you talk and teach for hours. What's a book that every leader should read?
5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni, and The Friendship Advantage by Mo Fathelbab.
I know that guy. He's pretty good. We'll put a link to both of those in the show notes, but I couldn't agree more with the first. And the second one is on my read list. I'm moving it up. I haven't had a chance to read it yet. What is, if you were to look back at all the leadership advice that you've given or you've received through your life, what is the best leadership advice you've ever been given that you now make sure that you give as a gift to others?
I'm going to go to my grandfather once again. He's like, if you're in the jungle and you encounter a lion, stick your hand down its throat and rip its guts out. And that's just been this reminder to be courageous. Because you know what? At the end of the day, being vulnerable is also courageous.
Oh, it is being courageous. It absolutely is. I love that. What's a lesson that you had to learn the hard way? Like, there's some things that we can be told, all these great people can give us wisdom. They can give us advice, but sometimes we just, and maybe it's just me, we just have to learn things the hard way and experience it for ourselves. Do you have any lessons you've had to learn like that?
Well, I mean, look back to this notion of speaking from experience and not giving advice. I got advice to call my father for 10 years that went in one ear and out the other. And I didn't hear it until a member of my forum lost his father.
Yeah, advice is one thing, but shared experiences and helping learn from others' experiences. I think about that's kind of the purpose of a podcast like this is we can share stories and we can listen and learn.
That's the lesson. You got
That's the lesson. What's a leadership myth that you would like to debunk? Something that people hold as true, but you don't believe is true.
that it's just business. Whenever I hear it's just business, I'm like, it's not just business. It's personal.
It's always personal because we're people.
We're people.
We're people. Okay. Last question. At the end of the day, when you go home, when you turn it off, whatever your ritual shutdown is, what has to have happened during your day for you to look at it and go, today was a good day. Today was successful.
Feeling like I accomplished something at work, feeling like I had at least one physical activity that I like, and feeling a connection with somebody that I love.
Accomplished something at work, did something physical, and connection with someone you love. That's pretty cool. Mo, what's your big, hairy, audacious goal?
1 billion people in peer groups by 2053. That's a big, hairy, audacious goal, but I believe in my soul, the world would be a better place if we had that.
And that's incredibly specific. It is big, hairy, and audacious. Actually, when you shared that with me previously, it really inspired me to get a little more introspective about my own goals and think bigger. How are you bringing that to the world? How can others who are intrigued or interested in this conversation, the power of what Forum can be, how can they learn and be part of that billion?
Well, there's multiple levels. Number one, if you would like to facilitate these groups, reach out to us. We have a facilitator certification, and we'd love to get you on board so you can propel this process forward. Number two, you could bring peer groups to your organization, whether it's an association that has peers that are doing similar work, or whether it's a company like the one whose executive team I just read the note from the CEO. So that's another way to bring peer groups as learning groups, peer learning groups in organizations. We just did that with Texas Health, and literally they have 8 internal facilitators that are using the peer learning group process to help educate their adult learners on the new processes so they could actually learn together.
I love that. And how, if they're interested in this, where can they connect with you? Where can they connect with your organization to find out more?
Yes, internationalfacilitatorsorganization.com or mofathelbab.com or Mo Fathelbab on LinkedIn.
It's a great 3 ways to get you. And I will, I'm very excited. I'm going to be going through your facilitation program just because I can't wait. I want some of this magic that you've tapped into, because I do think that you have an incredible way of creating these spaces for people to do their best work. And that's ultimately what happens is humans do their best work in spaces and places where they are seen, they are heard, and that we can align on what's best, for the world we're trying to create. So Mo, thank you so incredibly much for taking and investing your time today. And it's so deeply enriching for me personally to be a part of your circle and to have had some of your influence in my life. So thank you.
Thank you, Dusty. Such a pleasure. Thank you.
Hey, before you go, if this episode helped you see leadership differently, I have 3 personal requests. First, and this is the most important one, share this with one leader who needs it. Think of someone in your network who's frustrated with their team's execution or is trying to scale their own impact. Copy this episode link right now and text them, hey, I just listened to this episode and I think you'll get real value from it. That simple act of sharing, that is servant leadership in action. Second, subscribe to Leadership Unlocked. Whether you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or your favorite podcast player, just hit subscribe or the follow button. That way you won't miss the next episode, and it helps us reach more leaders like you. And third, if you're willing, This would be a huge help for us. Leave a 5-star rating and write a quick review. I know it takes 60 seconds of your time, but here's what it does. It helps other leaders discover the show. Every rating, every review, it's how we expand our impact together. So those 3 things: share with a friend, subscribe, leave a review. I'm deeply appreciative, and that would give us so much help. Thanks for being part of the Leadership Unlocked community. Now go create some clarity for others.